Coming up on Vegas Nation Blitz, shutout for the first time since 2014.
That right there is embarrassing, and that should never happen, especially with the group of guys in that locker room.
The Raiders apologizing to fans after a lackluster performance.
I apologize to Raider Nation for that performance, and again, I own that.
We'll break down what went wrong for the Raiders in New Orleans right now on Vegas Nation Blitz.
Powered by the Las Vegas Review-Journal, this is Vegas Nation Blitz. Presented by D&R House of Diamonds, making luxury affordable. Located in the One Summerlin building in downtown Summerlin.
Welcome into Vegas Nation Blitz. Cassie Soto here with you. I'm sure there are some Raiders fans out there wishing Sunday's game was a bad dream, but unfortunately it did happen. The Raiders were shut out for the first time in 8 years after falling to the Saints 24-0. It was an all-around bad team loss, and we're here to break down what went wrong, starting with our top stories brought to you by Capriati's. Make your game day extraordinary with Capriati's. Order now. Joining us now is Raiders beat writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Vinny Bonsignor. Vinny, we heard Derek Carr call this loss embarrassing. Head coach Josh McDaniels apologized to Raiders fans after having some days now to analyze Sunday's game. Can you pinpoint, or were you able to come up with some answers as to what the heck went wrong for the Raiders in New Orleans?
I just don't think the Raiders matched the desperation level of the Saints, who were also a team that was playing with desperation to get back into their own race and their own division after a slow start as well. The Raiders have talked about playing with an urgency. They don't like to use the word desperation, but that's what it is. Let's not kid ourselves. They're in desperation mode. Well, I think they saw what real desperation looked like. And how it's supposed to be handled by the Saints. And they weren't ready to match it at all in New Orleans, and that's why they got beaten up in every phase of the game, including special teams, coaching, along the offensive line, the defensive line. Everywhere you look, they got beat up pretty good. It's because one team played with a necessary desperation level and the other didn't, and the other was the Raiders. Here's the one thing that they could take away from that loss and the lesson that they learned. That was real desperation that they saw across the line of scrimmage and in that building. And until they are okay with and able to and willing to play with that kind of desperation, then they're not going to win as many football games as they want. If they can replicate what the Saints did to them, and that's the desperation that they're going to play with, especially starting this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, this team is still capable of winning some games, and there's enough games left to play to make something of this season, but they can't play with pretended desperation. They got to play with real desperation.
Well, I know, Vinny, you recently spoke with Raiders owner Mark Davis, and of course the questions that everybody's asking is Josh McDaniels, the Raiders head coach, on the hot seat? And if he isn't, should he be?
Yeah, no, he's not on the hot seat, and I'm going to say no, he shouldn't be on the hot seat. The Raiders have been an impulsive organization for far too long, stopping and starting and unpulling the plug, bringing this guy, bringing in that guy. What has it gotten them over the last 20 some odd years? 2 playoff appearances, a team last year that had to win 5 straight games or so just to make the playoffs. A bunch of those were last second field goal wins. What they need is patience. What they need is stability. What they need is to put a plan together and let that plan play out. So no, number one, Mark Davis, none of that was true. Any of the reports that you saw was false. As he told me in a text, Josh is going to be the coach here for a long time. And I believe that to be the case.
Well, last one, Vinny, you are joining us from a hotel room somewhere in Florida as the team is out there this week preparing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They stayed on the East Coast this week. Do you think this little mini road trip is coming at a good time, being that they can minimize distractions and hopefully come together as a team after that loss?
Yeah, I mean that always can help. It's just them out here. You know what I'm saying? There's no distractions of being home and leaving the building and everyone going their separate ways, which is often the case. But they're forced to basically be their own support system out here. And also, I think hitting rock bottom like they did on Sunday Look, was that the Raiders? Did that, reflect who the Raiders were from a talent standpoint, what happened on Sunday? I don't think it is. I think it was just a bad day at the office across the board and an unacceptable day at that. But I don't think that that's who the Raiders really are. And I think hitting rock bottom the way they did, where they understood they didn't come correct in that game on any level. And when you don't, that's what can happen in this league. As they've shown through the first 7 weeks, even though the results weren't always there, they were in every game. I should say this first 6 games of the season. When they did come with the correct attitude, they were in every game. They won a couple of them. They lost some heartbreakers. We all get it, yada, yada, yada. But when they don't come correct, they could get embarrassed. And that's not a good feeling. And if the Raiders have some pride, they're not going to let that happen again.
Around the League, brought to you by South Point Sportsbook. Download the app at southpointsports.com. It's time for Around the League. It's Adam Hill here, our NFL writer and Raiders writer as well, and Heidi Fang here. We're going to talk all about the trades and what happened, what teams improved. Adam, let's just start right there. What did you think after the trade deadline came and went? What team got stronger?
Yeah, I think a couple of teams were able to do some really good things at the trade deadline. We saw a lot more movement than usual. And I think that's because a lot of teams think that they're in a position to win and that maybe their future draft picks aren't as valuable because they can get players now that can help them. And the first at the top of the mind is the Miami Dolphins, who felt that they were a defensive playmaker away potentially. They go out, they get Bradley Chubb, which certainly impacts the AFC West as well, where the Raiders play. The Denver Broncos losing a premier pass rusher in the league, but the Miami Dolphins get stronger. The power of draft picks, the power of trading, all those things are on full display. And we saw the Dolphins go get very aggressive because they think they have a chance in the AFC.
And this question I have for you may have nothing to do with the game that the Falcons have against the Chargers this week, but down the road, maybe some impact. What did you make of Calvin Ridley getting traded despite not being able to play this year?
Yeah, and we don't know really when. I mean, everybody talks about Calvin Ridley as having a 1-year suspension. It's an indefinite suspension. He just has a chance to appeal after this year. So basically, it's Jacksonville making a claim that, hey, look, we haven't been able to find that elite wide receiver. We went out and paid Christian Kirk a ton of money. He's very, very good, but he's not maybe that number 1A guy that they haven't been able to find. And maybe you don't think you can get it in the draft, but you do take a shot. I mean, it's a long shot. You don't know when Calvin Ridley can play or if he's going to be able to play at the same level. But if Calvin Ridley returns next year and he's the Calvin Ridley that we know after missing potentially 2 years with injury and then the suspension, then that's a home run of a trade. It's really just the Jaguars taking a shot on the future and saying, we haven't been able to find that true 1A guy, but maybe we can do it this way through some really, really unconventional methods. I think it's worth the risk reward here.
Sam Gordon here, checking in on behalf of Vegas Nation with this week's injury brief. Raiders practicing at IMG Academy in Sarasota, Florida, ahead of their game with the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, and a relatively clean bill of health. Devontae Adams, who battled an illness last week, was designated as a limited participant in Wednesday's practice with the illness, but he was still out there nonetheless. Quarterback Derek Carr, injury designation back, but was a full participant in practice. Also limited were defensive tackle Neil Farrell with a knee injury, wide receiver Matt Collins with a heel, tight end Darren Waller limited, but out there with a hamstring injury, and then cornerback Sam Webb with a hamstring and back injury limited as well. The only non-participant linebacker Define Diablo. For updates as the Raiders prep for Jacksonville, be sure to visit vegasnation.com. I am Sam Gordon. That is this week's injury brief.
D&R House of Diamonds is Las Vegas's elite private office jeweler, the perfect bridge between internet pricing and a traditional brick-and-mortar jewelry store. We specialize in loose diamonds, natural and lab-grown, engagement rings, fashion jewelry, custom design, and jewelry repairs. We operate by appointment in our beautiful offices in the One Summerlin building, downtown Summerlin. Our great relationships with the world's largest diamond wholesalers and our low overhead saves you hundreds, if not thousands, on your purchase.
With Capriotti's, game day is always extraordinary. Fuel your passion with our award-winning cheesesteaks, in-house oven-roasted turkey, and classic subs. Or create a fan frenzy with our catering trays that are perfect for any crew. At Capriotti's, we deliver extraordinary to you.
Now let's take a look at Raiders social media. The Raiders took a trip down south and are staying in Florida as they prepare to take on the Jags in Duval. So nothing spooky this year from the team, but Raider Social shouting out Raider Nation, who comes to every game like it's Halloween. The most intimidating fan base out of all 32 teams. And we're in November now, so expect Christmas decorations to start popping up. But in the last week of October, Raiders owner Mark Davis was in the giving mood already, gifting a Ferrari to the mind freak, Chris Angel. Sir Elton John brought his farewell Yellow Brick Road tour to Allegiant Stadium this week while the Raiders were away and got the customary locker room and jersey treatment. You already know he has a snazzy outfit and a pair of absolutely fire glasses to go with it. And finally, we'll leave you with some silver and black Halloween hot takes.
I think candy corn gets a bad rap. I wouldn't say it's top 10 for me, but it's not like, oh God, I gotta eat candy corn. I'm like, all right, I can do it.
I hate candy corn. I think most American sweets are ridiculous. You guys don't know how to make chocolate right.
Just disgusting.
No, it's terrible. What? Who eats that?
Cassie Soto back with you, and I am joined by sports columnist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Ed Graney. Ed, the NFL trade deadline has come and gone, and the Raiders did not make any last-minute moves. Do you think that was the right call by the team, or was there someone out there that you think they should have pushed for to maybe help bring some life back into this locker room?
I mean, Cassie, maybe an offensive lineman. We don't know who was really out there available. You don't know what the value was. That's the key here. What was the value? What were people asking for in return? I think after what we saw in New Orleans, they need to really focus on themselves. They need to focus on themselves and getting back to whatever they're going to be this year. So I don't know if one player would have made that major of a difference on this team. They're 2-5 right now. And again, one, we don't know what was out there. And two, we don't know what people were asking for. I don't think they were sellers. Maybe they listened to offers for people like John Abram and Cleve Farrell. But again, maybe what they heard back is that they weren't going to get enough. So it passed. They didn't do anything. Now they just got to focus on who they have on their team.
Well, you recently wrote an article, Ed, for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, where you said that it's not the fact that the Raiders lost, it's how they lost. Can you just go in depth for us there on what you meant by that?
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at how they lost, there was no fight, there was no grit. I likened it to last year when Rich Bisaccia was the interim head coach there. Those guys played for one another, and it was in the aftermath of the turmoil of John Gruden resigning. They played for one another. They fought for one another. They fought for Rich Bisaccia. They didn't know how good they were going to be, but they eventually made the playoffs under him. I think they need to get back to that. I think they need to find that passion and that consistent fighting and grit and going after everything like they did for Bisaccia. I didn't see much of that on Sunday. We didn't see much of anything on Sunday in that 24-0 loss. So if they can get back to that, I think it would do them really well down the stretch of this season at 2-5, trying to string together some wins and possibly at least make it look like they contend in the AFC West. If you watch that game the other day, I know people would say that's crazy given how they played, but it's football. It's a long season. You don't know what you're going to get. I just don't know what their identity is right now. And I don't know if they know what their identity is, but they better get one really fast because this season can go, it can go quickly.
Yeah. Well, going off of that, Ed, how does Josh McDaniels not lose this locker room? Obviously, you say they played with no grit. There was no fire on Sunday. How does he make sure that his players, that the guys around him don't lose that faith?
Well, he does opposite of what he did in Denver, because that's what happened in Denver. Now, he was a much younger coach then. He was much more inexperienced. So I think he learned a lot from that situation. I think he's going to be much better this time in the face of adversity. You've got to rely on your leaders, those guys with the C on their uniforms, those captains. They're the ones this week in Florida, when they're out there practicing Florida, preparing for the Jacksonville game. You need those guys stepping up. You can only do so much as a coach. You can only give so many motivational speeches. It has to come from within the locker room. It has to come from Derek Carr and other captains this week to really, really lead. That was a horrible performance. You need leaders now to step in and say, look, watch the tape, see what you did wrong, and then you got to put it to bed. Because if you wallow in it, again, like McDaniels said the other day, shame on you. You have to own it. You have to know it happened. But now you need your leaders to step forward so that locker room is not lost. I don't think it will be. I think Carr and others are really good leaders. I think McDaniels learned from his mistakes in Denver. But you make a good point here, especially after a loss like that. They've got to get back to it. Now they've got to put New Orleans away and focus on Jacksonville.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Vegas Nation Blitz. For more Raiders news, you can always go to vegasnation.com, and please join us on Saturday morning for Vegas Nation Game Day as we bring you a preview of the Raiders' Week 9 road matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. For our entire Vegas Nation crew, I'm Cassie Soto. Have a great day.
Powered by the Las Vegas Review-Journal, this is Vegas Nation Blitz. Presented by DNR House of Diamonds, making luxury affordable. located in the One Summerlin building in downtown Summerlin.